We are live here on a Football Friday on Birds 365. It's going to be a little different. Not today's show. We got two good guests coming today, so Birds 365 will be what it usually is. But, John, I don't know about you, but I'm not exactly looking forward to Sunday. We do our Friday shows leading into the weekend every week. For 22 consecutive weeks, we've had meaningful football to get ready for on Sunday. This week, it's the Pro Bowl we're getting ready for. And even though there are a bunch of Eagles there and more power to them, I hope they have a good game. Hope they have a good time. Yeah, I'm not exactly pumped up for that, but we'll cover that over the course of the show. But the number one story is Dougie P is back in the league. JM, did you see this one coming?
I did see it coming at the end. There was a big lull there. Remember, Doug Peterson was the first person interviewed for that job and circled all the way back, and they ultimately ended up in the same space. I don't think there's any question league-wide that the Jaguars decided on Byron Leftwich, and there was sort of this crackback from his camp that they didn't want to work with Trent Baalke, and they wanted to bring in Adrian Wilson as the general manager, and he stood his ground, very similar to the Doug Peterson standing his ground with the coaching staff here. Ultimately, they couldn't come to an agreement. Now, the original talk with Doug was he didn't want to work with Trent Baalke. So the only surprise is the timing. Ultimately, I think Rick Spielman's going to be there as the sort of new football executive, whatever title they give him. And he's going to be the one sort of working hand in hand with Doug Peterson. And I think, that's very good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know why Shad Khan is moving forward with Trent Baalke still there. I mean, Trent Baalke's still there. It's one of those situations where if you're taking his power away, why aren't you, it must be some kind of personal relationship or something of that nature. But we'll see how that part of it shakes out. The Jaguars got a lot better if they're bringing in we know they're bringing in Doug Peterson, but if they're bringing in Doug Peterson and Rick Spielman, they're getting a lot better, and they have the quarterback to build on the foundation. And I know Doug Peterson's excited about that, to work with Trevor Lawrence. So happy for Doug Peterson. It's going to be interesting from a Philadelphia perspective. To see, and the Jaguars come and visit the Eagles this year at Lincoln Financial Field. But think about the AFC South, Jody. I mean, you're going to have Doug Peterson and Frank Reich twice a year. Well, who knows if Carson Wentz is there? You might have Jonathan Gannon in Houston. He's a finalist there. They're going to have to make a decision too. The AFC South could be getting a lot of television time in the Philadelphia area.
Right. Could be Philadelphia, the South, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the Jaguars. You mentioned the Rick Spielman hire as well. Do we know yet that Trent Baalke is just going to be a figurehead? Do we not know that Trent Baalke is going to be the guy who Rick Spielman is going to report directly to? We don't have a clue yet as to what the power.
Well, they haven't made the hire yet, but the scuttlebutt around the league is Spielman's going to report only to Shad Khan, so he's going to be the one in charge. And ultimately, if he's not going to go there. I mean, he's not going to go there for a position behind Trent Baalke. So you'll know relatively quickly if he's there. He's going to be in charge of the football operations. And I would assume that's what Doug Peterson wants, based on the fact that he didn't want to work with Trent Baalke in the first place. So I'm guessing at this point that's going to be the end game of this particular sort of shuffling of the deck chairs in Jacksonville. And then from the Jaguars' perspective, you have to ask the question, well, if you wanted Byron Leftwich, why didn't you just hire the guy he wanted to be the GM? So, I mean, those are questions Shad Khan's going to have to answer.
All right. We'll take another step down this road. I like Byron Leftwich. I think he did a hell of a job last year working with Brady, working with Arians, the triumvirate of those three, running that Tampa Bay offense all the way to a Super Bowl title and another pretty good lengthy run in the playoffs this year. He's still relatively young. He has not had head coaching experience. Did he have the gravitas to say, "Oh yeah, I'll take your job, but only if you use my handpicked guy as the general manager"? We're dealing with all this talk about whether interviews for the Rooney Rule are actually being given a realistic chance to get the job, or is it just them fulfilling obligation to take interviews? And a guy like Leftwich becomes the favorite to get a job. And he comes in having never coached before with the stance of, well, if you bring my guy in as the general manager too, well, then, yeah, I'll sign on the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's pretty presumptive if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it from both ways. What you just said, I get. Yeah, I mean, the guy's a 42-year-old guy. He's unproven in this league as a head coach. He's getting an opportunity to be a head coach, and you're making demands. That's not necessarily a good look. On the other hand, I see it from his perspective in that, look, he doesn't trust the guy, Trent Baalke, and he's not the only one. He's got a bad reputation around the league. So you got to look at Shad Khan. And he's saying to himself, probably, you only get one shot at this, especially as an African American in the history of this league. So if you go in there and stink up the joint because the GM is undercutting you and not doing what you want, is not working together, that's probably it. I mean, you'll get another job as a coordinator, but if your ultimate goal is to be a head coach, I get it from that perspective as well. You get one opportunity, you want to hit the home run, and you want to set everything up as best as possible. So if you do fail, you can look in the mirror and say, well, at least I failed doing the way I wanted to do it. So I kind of see it from both ends of the spectrum. But there's no doubt we're in a different generation where people expect more. I mean, in an older generation, if you got a job, you'd be thankful and you say, okay, I'll try to make the best of it. This is a little bit different now. People want, we look at it in Ben Simmons. I hate to bring up Ben all the time, but he doesn't even want criticism, and he wants people to go to his house, even if he doesn't answer their text message, and love him up. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just where you are. And as an executive, and we'll talk to Randy Mueller, it's something you got to deal with. Do you want the guy? But I will say, if I'm Shad Khan, that's probably what I would have said. I would have said, well, screw you. I'm going to go get somebody else.
I'm giving you the job, and you're going to dictate another hire. I'm hiring you, and you want to dictate another hire? Like I said, pretty damn presumptive.
But then again, he's going to hire somebody else for Doug. So I'm very confident in that.
But do you have any information that Doug suggested Rick Spielman was the guy? As far as I know, there's no crossover between those two guys. How does that?
No, but here's one of the things, and one thing I'm very interested of. I think it was our buddy Mike Garafolo first reported it a couple weeks ago, that Rick was close to getting a job and he wanted to bring in Doug as the head coach in Jacksonville. That's where it first started. So I believe Mike was the first who reported it. So I'll give him credit for that. One of the things I always laughed at the Eagles for, and I still do it, I laughed at everybody that believes it. And I said on this show, when the Eagles spun that Doug Peterson with his coaching staff and didn't know anybody and didn't have any connections. I mean, the guy played in the league for 13 years. The guy knows Rick Spielman. They're friends. They've grown to know each other from other avenues. This presumption that you don't know anybody if you didn't coach with them is absurd. I mean, the first whisper of his defensive coordinator is Jim Caldwell, who wasn't one of his coaches, but he was with the Eagles. And you learn, again, he had a 13-year playing career. He knows people. He knows everybody in this league. It's always been one of those dumb spins. And look, I get it. You're trying to make your decision look the best as humanly possible. And I don't even blame the Eagles for it. I blame the people who bought it hook, line, and sinker that this guy doesn't know anybody in the NFL. He knows everybody in the freaking NFL.
Which I think was actually pretty funny because you've reported this. The other guys in Eagle Beat have reported this. It's never been stated on the record by either of the two parties, the Eagles and or Doug Peterson, but I think you guys are right. A big breaking point between Doug and the Eagles was Doug's desire to have more say over his very own staff. So they want to mock the guy because he didn't know anybody. We came in and took over a coach. He doesn't have good enough contacts. He's not feeling strongly enough about his staff. Then when he finally gets some nerve and says, here's what I want out of my staff, you go, oh, well, you don't get to dictate your staff. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say the guy didn't make enough contacts as he was coming through the league. And then when he really gets strong about who he wants to work with and have on his staff, then you bounce him out the door. That's just stone cold ridiculous.
Yeah, and I thought it was always an easy decision. I think if I were in that room and was Jeffrey Lurie, I would say, okay, I don't agree with it. Press Taylor's been sort of the lightning rod that people started making fun of, and I've told that story. I think it's ironic. Doug Peterson didn't hire Press Taylor.
Right,
Press Taylor was here in the organization. The organization loved Press Taylor. The organization thought he was a young, quickly rising coach with a lot of upside. You even go back to the Super Bowl season. You remember they made it very clear who came up with the Philly special. That was Press Taylor, who mined it from an old Minnesota-Chicago game. Chicago ran it on a 2-point conversion. It succeeded. That's where he found it. They put it in. They had it in. They used it in the biggest moment, the Super Bowl. He's a rising star, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, and by the way, there are plenty of things to criticize Press Taylor for. I thought he was way too close, personally, with Carson Wentz. I didn't think he was willing to be his boss. He was more of his friend. So it's not that I don't think you can criticize Press Taylor, but he was a rising star in the organization right up until Doug Peterson took an interest in him, and then he was an idiot. And by the way, Frank Reich hired him right away, who was loved and beloved in this city, and people now give him credit for Doug Peterson's offense, even though Frank Reich will tell you to your face 150 times, no, that was Doug's offense. And but for whatever reason, people spin things the way they want to spin things. And we'll see. I mean, those are the first two names floated out there, Press Taylor, Jim Caldwell, to be on his coaching staff. It's going to be interesting because I'll tell you this, Jody. I don't know. What's today's date? I don't even know.
Today would be the 4th. Today would be the 4-year anniversary of the Super Bowl winning victory over the New England Patriots. For the
February 4th. Okay. So we got a long way to go till September. We don't even know what the schedule is, but we do know the Jacksonville Jaguars are coming here to play the Philadelphia Eagles. And
right.
My advice to Nick Sirianni is win that game. Do anything to win that game.
That's kind of a key one. Yeah, that's a circle it as soon as the schedule comes out type game. How do you think, and there'll be a handful of guys left on this Eagle roster by the time 2022 rolls around who are also on the 2017 Super Bowl winning roster. It will be just a handful because that's what happens in the National Football League. Father Time wins and players move on and teams move on, but there'll be a couple of guys left. How do they handle? They go over and do the bro hug thing in warm-ups. Is there anything that is actually something that the Eagle fans can see a reaction to Doug P from his former players? How do you think it plays out on that day, whatever that day may be, that we won't find out about when it is till April?
Yeah, I mean, I think people will be happy to see Doug, and certainly his players loved him. I mean, there'll be no issues from that perspective. I think even the organization will be very gracious and thank him for coming back. I think the fans will be as well for the most part. But once kickoff starts, they're going to want to win that game. They're going to want to prove they were right. Maybe they were right. I don't know. It's just going to be interesting. it is good for the Eagles. He's in the other conference, and you're not going to see him that often. It just happens to work out. You're going to see him this year. But it is going to be interesting to watch it from afar and to see, because that is a bad organization. And if he can turn that organization around, well, there's no more whispers about Doug Peterson. I think there was too much. And a lot of this is human nature, and that, Jeffrey and Howie wanted credit for the Super Bowl, and Doug got more of the credit because he's the head coach. And I think there was a little twinge of jealousy that started all this, and it ended where it ended. It shouldn't have ended. Doug should have been given, I've said it 100 times, I still believe it, he should have been given another year. Then if he fails, then fire him. Fine. With his guys. And he wanted Press Taylor to be the offensive coordinator, Matt Burke to be the defensive coordinator. And if he couldn't get Matt Burke, it was going to be Corey Unlin. And people snicker at that. Fine. Then if he fails, he fails. But he earned the right to pick who he wanted to pick on his coaching staff.
That was an opinion that was shared by many when the divorce happened between Doug Peterson and the Eagles. They ended up with Nick Sirianni. At least they seem to have landed on their feet with their replacement choice. But good for Doug Peterson in that he's getting a job just 1 year out, which, oh, by the way, he cashed Eagle checks all throughout this year because he had time to go left on his contract, so we didn't have to come up with a GoFundMe page for Dougie P. He got to get out, play some golf, and enjoy his life and go watch his son play. But he's right back in the mix after only 1 year, which is not a bad thing. Some guys wait a lot longer than that. Some get lucky and turn around and get a job right away. Doug was hurt by the fact that the Eagles waited a week before they decided they were going to move on from him. And usually the chopping block comes as soon as the season is over and done with. The Monday thereafter, the Tuesday thereafter. Doug didn't get his walking papers till a week later, so that compromised his possibility of getting a job last year. Well, a year later, he is back in the NFL as a head coach. And yes, I think a lot of Philadelphia fans will be pulling in part for the Jaguars next year, except for that 1 week when the Jaguars are coming to Philadelphia to actually take on the Eagles. All right, that is just one of many topics we will hit on today. We've got two good guests that are scheduled to join us. It's a football Friday. Yeah, it's only the Pro Bowl on Sunday, but a Senior Bowl with guys that are going to eventually play in the league you can watch on Saturday. So you actually got football both days, but it is not a true NFL weekend of action. But we'll make the most of it just the same and try and stick to our routine. Ed Game Day Kracz is going to hop aboard. He's certainly got some insight to Doug Peterson getting the job down in Jacksonville and his time here in Philadelphia. So we'll get Eddie Kracz up early. In our second hour, Randy Mueller, ex-executive of the year in the National Football League, former general manager, Dolphins and Saints. He's going to hop aboard with us, certainly with the NFL's going through this week with the Brian Flores lawsuit. We want to talk to him about the Super Bowl as well. So we've got several good topics we can touch on with Randy Mueller, who will join us in hour number 2. But it's the Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
You know you like being right. That's why you should enroll in an Independence Blue Cross plan. It's the health plan chosen by more people than any other, with more doctors and hospitals, more benefits that really rock, more of the coverage you want for the right price, including free doctor visits 24/7. It's a choice you can feel good about, because when you're right, you're right. And when you've got Independence Blue Cross, you're right where you need to be. Call 1-844-200-2583 today to get an Independence Blue Cross plan.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
You get your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. And even though there isn't a true meaningful game to be played this weekend, sorry, Pro Bowl fans, it's not meaningful.
You didn't like the Pro Bowl Skills Challenge, Jody?
They have that yesterday?
Yeah.
I haven't even seen the highlights, let alone I didn't watch it live.
There's some good highlights. You should check it out. There's some interesting. Micah Parsons won the fastest man race.
Guy. Yeah. But I read something about it. I didn't see it, but he said that Tyreek Hill didn't even try.
No, he didn't try. But I always think it's funny.
Okay. Yeah, let me get to those highlights as quickly as possible. Guys not trying. Yeah, that's my idea.
You can tell he wasn't
exciting
trying. I always think it's funny, and we'll bring in Ed. I'm sorry, Ed's probably not excited by this, but Tyreek Hill has always wanted to have a race with Usain Bolt. And I'm like, Tyreek, you're insane. You're not even going to be in the same stratosphere. But these guys have such big egos. They think they can run faster than Usain Bolt. He can't even beat Micah Parsons. He better stop talking about that.
Here he is, Ed Kracz, who's got to listen to me and McMullen argue what else is new. Ed, what do you have planned for this weekend? You're going to rewatch the highlights from the Pro Bowl Skills Challenge?
Yeah, I think that's a hard pass on that. You know, I'm sure there are some good highlights, but I'm not even sure I'll watch the game. I might have it on in the background, but
yeah. I would recommend staying away. But hey, if you like it, you like it, enjoy it.
Yeah, the Eagles got 5 players in it, so if you're missing football, I mean, we're down to 2 games here until the USFL gets cranked up here in a couple months.
Philadelphia Stars, baby.
Yeah, playing in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, that's your town. That's one of your towns.
Well, it's my son's old town. Yeah, he lived down there for a couple of years, but I won't be going to any home games for the
Stars. Will you be going to the home game of Doug Peterson? It's actually going to be here. The Jaguars are going to visit the Philadelphia Eagles. We don't know when. We don't know the date. But I said, Ed, Nick Sirianni better start thinking about winning that game pretty quickly. It's going to be interesting. What do you think about the Jaguars landing on Doug Peterson?
Yeah, it's interesting that it happens on the 4-year anniversary of the day he won a Super Bowl, right? I mean, I guess the news kind of broke on February 3rd, Thursday, yesterday. But, today I imagine Doug will have his first press conference as the Jaguars coach 4 years after he won a Super Bowl, which is, certain symmetry to life. I like when life has that symmetry to it. And that seems to be the case here with Doug. And I think last week, weren't we just talking about Doug Peterson and why he wasn't getting any interest?
Yeah, he was. There was a big lull. It kind of picked up again last week when the news broke that Jacksonville was bringing him in again. But there was a big lull. He was their first interview like a month ago, probably over a month ago. And then he got an interview in Chicago, and we knew they weren't going in his direction because they just fired Matt Nagy, who's a Andy Reid guy, who's a Doug Peterson guy. So they wanted to go in a different direction. And then it just went silent And all of a sudden, Jacksonville couldn't get the guy they wanted, which was Byron Leftwich. And you got to circle back. You talk about symmetry, Ed. Go back to 2016, and the Eagles, they didn't want Doug Peterson. They wanted Adam Gase, and then they wanted Ben McAdoo, and then they landed on Doug Peterson and worked out. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Same thing might happen to Jacksonville. They wanted Byron Leftwich. They land on Doug Peterson. I don't know. Super Bowl, 4 years, as you mentioned. Why are we talking about Doug Peterson in Jacksonville 4 years after the only Super Bowl title in Eagles franchise history? It still amazes me.
It really does that they won that game. I mean, and you're going to find on Twitter and all the social media accounts today all these highlights of the Eagles and, winning that Super Bowl. Of course, the Philly special. And, listen, I'll watch those before I'll watch the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, Pro Bowl activity. Yeah, exactly right, Ed.
But listen, I think it's a great hire for Jacksonville, to be honest. I mean, Leftwich would have been good, yeah. But, Doug has the history of working with Carson Wentz. Now, you could say he helped ruin Carson Wentz. I don't know if that would be the case, but he did have Wentz playing at a very high level in 2017, and he's got Trevor Lawrence. The Jaguars have 12 draft picks. I think 5 of those are in the first 103. So he's an experienced guy who knows how to run an offense, and he could be just what they need, that emotional intelligence down there in North Florida.
Let me run something by both you guys. I want your reaction to this. Our buddy Sheil Kapadia, who, of course, covers the Eagles, covers National Football League now for Athletic, was here in town for many years, just tweeted this about Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson's strengths, capable of high-level game planning and play calling, connecting with players and his staff, adjusting scheme to players, won't meddle with personnel or defense. 2 questions: can he build a good enough staff? Can he be innovative on offense? There's only one that kind of feels like it's questionable to me. I think, as I said, the last 2 were questions that he was saying he didn't have the answer to. One he says he's pretty sure about. I'm not as sure. Adjusting scheme to players. Did Doug Peterson show that in his years here in Philadelphia? Because he was able to win the Super Bowl with Carson Wentz being the quarterback for the first 3 quarters of the season and then Nick Foles taking over. Is that an attribute you would give to Doug Peterson, that basically he can take players and plug them in, or take their strengths and redo his game plan calling? Is that a fair praise level achievement that Doug Peterson has earned?
It's curious. I'll put it that way. And I don't want to speak for Sheil, but maybe he checks that box for Sheil because of what Peterson and Frank Reich, even maybe to a larger extent, were able to do once they lost Carson Wentz with the knee injury out in Los Angeles when Nick Foles had to step in. They went back and watched every snippet of tape on Nick Foles' previous games, and then they kind of adjusted their offense to what Nick Foles does, and that really helped. They became more of an RPO-heavy offense, and that's kind of what led them to the Super Bowl. So maybe that's why he checks that box of being able to adjust scheme to players. But, yeah, other than that, I would have a hard time really thinking that, he did that.
Right.
But he didn't have to do it often because Wentz was his quarterback for 4 years, and except for that little hiccup when Nick Foles had to step in and lead him to a Super Bowl. But yeah, to me, he was hesitant to play young players. I think. I mean, they did play some young players late in his tenure here, but it seemed like he really leaned on his veteran type players. And now he's going to have a much younger team down there in Jacksonville. I mean, who are the leaders on that Jaguars team? I can't think of anybody, but he had some pretty good leaders on this team when he came on board, and he had his leadership council that he was able to bounce ideas off of. But as far as adjusting scheme, I can't. Maybe John, you can. I can't think of any other time really where you could point to an example of that, other than, like I said, getting Nick Foles ready when Wentz got hurt.
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest part. I think, and we're going to try to have Sheil on the show early next week, Jody. He mentioned he could probably do it, so we'll ask him. My guess is he's talking about the Super Bowl years, Doug said, where they changed the entire offense. I think people forget that the Eagles played Nick Foles at the end of the regular season. He was pretty bad. I mean, he was pretty bad in the regular season. And it was Doug who said, all right, we gotta, and it was really more John DiPilippo than anybody else. John was the one who broke down like every single Nick Foles play, tried to figure out what he liked to do, but tried to figure out what he could do well. And as Ed mentioned, they went more to the RPOs, the quick throws, the quick reads. And Nick just got really, really hot at the right time. I always called him Vinny Johnson, the old microwave in the NBA. When he got hot, you couldn't stop him. And Nick Foles got hot, and nobody could stop him over that 2-week span. And, you know, whoever you want to give the credit for, Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, John DiPilippo, they were all involved. It's interesting, though, where people land. I say the same thing with Howie. When people say, well, the good picks are Joe Douglas or Andy Waddle. The bad picks are Howie Roseman. Howie's in charge. So if you're going to give him the credit for the bad picks, you got to give him credit for the good picks.
Exactly.
Same thing with Doug Peterson. He's in charge. It's his offense. And I will say, Frank Reich, I think you were there, Ed, when Frank, I know Les was there after the Super Bowl, graciously gave us about 15 minutes just by ourselves. And he was just gushing, obviously. And he was gushing about Doug Peterson. And I remember, and I'll never forget, because Frank doesn't curse. Anybody who knows Frank. And he came as close as he did to ever cursing. He called Doug a freaking star as a coach. So for all those people that want to say it was Frank Reich, it was Frank Reich, it was Frank Reich, Frank will be the first to tell you Doug Peterson is a freaking star as a coach, as he would describe it. So that would be my take.
That was a whirlwind post game. I believe I was there, and I think it was a freaking rock star.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah, he added the word rock star in there. You know, I don't know if Doug's playing air guitar like Donovan. Maybe that's why. But yeah, I think it was a rock star. But yeah, Frank really praised Doug up and down. Listen, Doug to me is a quality person, and I'm glad he's got this chance to, head up another team. And maybe he has some say, a little bit more say in how he puts together his staff. That's going to be interesting to see how he builds that out. Trent Baalke is, a lot of people didn't want to play, coach under his thumb, but it looks like maybe they're going to bring Rick Spielman in to be kind of the head of the operations. And, let's see what kind of say Doug has, because I think personally, he'll build a fine staff. He knows enough guys in this league now. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's got some clout to him now. It's going to be fun to watch what happens down there. It's almost going to be like Eagles South. We're going to be keeping an eye down there, what goes on in Jackson.
I was saying, Ed, how about if you think about the AFC South? Frank Reich is there. Who knows? Yeah. Carson might be there. So you're going to get Frank Reich and perhaps Carson Wentz against Doug Peterson twice a year. What if Jonathan Gannon ends up in Houston? What the AFC South is going to be exciting for Philadelphia fans.
Yeah, they're going to have to start televising that locally, those games, aren't they? So we can kind of watch those matchups.
Never going to happen. Pittsburgh always wins here in this town. Well, the AFC game is always the Steelers. They've done research on it for years. It annoys me because I'm hoping that it's the Jets from time to time, and it never is. Sorry, even with Dougie P or Carson, they didn't bring the Colts in at all this year as the AFC game.
Yeah, Jacksonville doesn't have
Doug
any
either.
Doug better get used to London too. He better like those trips.
That's very
cool. But it's going to be cool because the Eagles play the AFC South, right? They go to I think they go to the Colts, so they'll see Reich and maybe Wentz, and they host the Jags, and they go to Houston if Gannon's there. I mean, what's going on down there in Houston? Can't they pick a coach?
They got to make a decision.
Yeah, sure.
Now they're mixed up in the Brian Flores stuff, so I guess we'll go there with you since we have to ask you. I mean, that is such a mess. And they've named their sort of, not named officially, but, people like John McMullen, friend of the show here, is plugged in as anybody in Houston. It's down to Jonathan Gannon, Josh McCown, so very Eagles tint, and Brian Flores. I don't know if they're going to hire Brian Flores, so that would mean Jonathan Gannon or Josh McCown Yeah, what? I'll ask you. What the heck is going on in Houston?
That's a good question. I wish I knew because, listen, the Eagles, I mean, it's still very early in the offseason here, but with this whole Gannon thing up in the air, I don't think Gannon's at the Senior Bowl this week. I think
He's got an interview. Yeah.
Yeah, so Stoutland's there, but, this is a team, obviously, that needs help on defense. And your defensive coordinator is busy interviewing or waiting to hear from Houston, and he's not on hand in Mobile. Again, it's early. I'm not sure how big of a factor is, but, that has to be a little bit concerning that, he's not kind of all hands on deck. He's not all in, I should say.
Be where your feet are.
Yeah, be where you're. And right now it feels like his feet, he really wants this Houston job. So Houston has to make a decision. And it would be surprising, if they went with Brian Flores. But, boy, I wish they would. I mean, Flores is a qualified guy, and he had the courage to come out and speak his convictions, and I give him a ton of credit for that. And now it's almost like when you see these hirings, you're almost in the back of your head going, well, geez, another white guy gets a job over some qualified, maybe some other qualified candidates, and I hope he gets it. I would love to see like an Eric Bieniemy get in a job, and Todd Bowles was mentioned, and Byron Leftwich. I mean, there's some qualified guys out there that just aren't getting jobs. And, that now is in my head. It's like, well, how come? Why aren't they? And I give Brian Flores a lot of credit for kind of bringing that awareness out a little bit more than maybe, all of us have really given thought to in the past.
And the Houston job, kind of like the Jacksonville job, is not the best job to get. And sorry, any Texan fans who may be watching. I see I annoyed some Steeler fans because I said I think it's wrong that they always show the Steelers game as the other game in town. So now I'll take off the Texan fans. That organization isn't in good shape. They don't know what they're going to do with their quarterback. They've had a couple of bad years in a row. They had a messy firing of their coach who they brought in for 1 year and never even gave a chance, and then turned around and fired him. I don't know if I'd want that job. I'd rather have the Jacksonville job than the Texans job as of right now. So what happens if Brian Flores gets that job? Does he then afterwards say, well, they mishandled me again? Well, they mishandle everybody. It's not just you, Brian. It's not because you're African-American. It's because they're just a bad football organization.
Yeah. How do you, in fact, I'll throw this in, Ed, and then you can, how do you, if you're an owner in this league, look, I agree with a lot of your sentiments and what you said about Brian Flores, but if you were to hire him now, how do you fire him if you think he's not doing a good job? And
Right.
I'm talking 2-3 years down the line, you're going to get killed. Doesn't that affect your thought process? This is such a difficult layered problem. It really is.
Yeah, but listen, wins and losses are what you're going to base your decision on. It's a results-oriented business, and if 2 or 3 years down the line, Brian Flores is sitting at 13-26 or whatever, then okay, then there's a justification. But when you look at the Dolphins, I mean, I think he had 2 winning seasons down there in Miami, which in a row, which isn't easy to do, and so really there was no great.
Well, I'll go. Let me throw this curveball at you then. We're talking about a Super Bowl winning coach here, fired 3 years off, winning Super Bowl. I mean, there have been coaches who have gotten fired for reasons that have nothing to do with what they did on the field. Probably David Culley being a perfect example this year. And to a certain degree, Brian Flores from as you said, a winning perspective, but he just didn't get along with the owner. Same thing with Doug Peterson and Jeffrey Lurie, where Jeffrey Lurie saying, I don't like your coaching staff, so you're out. I don't care if I got this Lombardi trophy. So I don't know how you can legislate that, that to me is the most difficult problem.
Yeah, I guess if Flores and whoever the GM is in Houston or the owner, they're not getting along, and Flores is 26-13, and you fire him, then then you might have issues. But listen, I mean, that's down the road. I always try to be where my feet are, right? I mean, what can Flores do today, tomorrow? Each day he's being evaluated. and maybe notes are kept if it comes down to a divorce at some point in the future. So there isn't a big, stink that would arise from any kind of firing. But certainly he's qualified in my book. And to answer Jody's question is what does he bring to Houston? Or I think Deshaun Watson probably stays, and not having Watson last year was, that was a big handicap for the Houston Texans, not having a real quarterback. Davis Mills was okay. Tyrod Taylor, I think, started the year, got hurt, but
hold on, let me hop in there, Ed.
Sure.
He stays for Flores, but he wouldn't play for David Culley.
Yeah, I don't know the dynamics of all that, Jody, but
I think Jack Easterby is the problem. And as long as he stays,
Jack Easterby's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
no, but I thought he liked Flores. I thought, that was one reason he wanted to go to Miami. Watson, one of his preferences to be traded was to Miami. I thought it was because of Flores. So I think, my understanding is they have a good relationship. So maybe, Flores is able to come in and kind of smooth that relationship over. And Watson gets back on the field. Of course, he's got all those other issues that, here we are a year later that really haven't been resolved yet, which is strange. But, maybe Watson stays. I don't know, because of Brian Flores.
One more Flores question, and this came to light within the last 24 hours. And I'm sorry, I either don't understand it or don't believe it. He got the text message from Bill Belichick, congrats on getting the job. It was before the job was ever actually given to anybody, and then he didn't get it. Belichick explained it away as, I just made a mistake. I meant Brian Dable, not Brian Flores, and I just sent the text to the wrong person. Okay, I'll believe all of that. Now Flores is actually claiming that he believes Belichick helped Dable get the job. Both Brians worked under Belichick in New England, and it's Flores' belief that Belichick wanted Dable to get the job, and he actually lobbied for him and has influence with the New York Giants. I know that the NFL is a tight little circle for as big a corporation as it is, and as much money as they generate, there is a nice little core of tight individuals. But Belichick is 2 friggin' decades removed from being with the Giants. Does Flores really make us believe that Belichick is in Mara's ear to tell him who he should or shouldn't hire as the head coach of the year? You buy any of that?
Well, I mean, it's almost like he said type of situation, unless there's documentation. I mean, I guess they're Brian Flores' beliefs. You don't know, at what emotional state he was in when he made those remarks, if he's still very fired up about this, which I can't blame him if he is. And if that's what he believes, it's hard to refute that. But, unless there's documentation with some of this stuff, like, the whole being paid to tank thing down there in Miami.
Well, that I kind of do believe.
Yeah, and then of course Hugh Jackson jumps on that and says, I was paid $50,000 to lose each game, but there's got to be some documentation. But I think this is just Brian Flores' belief that Belichick helped him get that job, and there's probably no documentation to it. But I'm not going to refute how Brian Flores feels emotionally about this. Maybe he has good reason to believe that. I don't know. So I'm not just going to dismiss it out of hand and think it's just kind of the rantings of some bitter man. I think maybe I'm sure he actually believes that, and if so, that's how he feels, and I don't know any differently if it's right or wrong.
Yeah, one of the problems, and we had Dan Lust on earlier in the week, one of the best sports lawyers in the industry, and he kind of mentioned, some of the Chargers came across as throwing things against the wall as opposed to being more focused. The problem with the accusations that as you mentioned, Ed, look, Denver, we'll use Denver in this example, the accusations against John Elway. Well, there's 5 other people in that room. So, it's going to be pretty concrete as to what went on from those other witnesses, so to speak. And the same thing with the New York Giants. The Giants put out an emphatic statement. They are very confident that Bill Belichick had no knowledge. But we all know, you just mentioned the Senior Bowl. There's people talk in this league. People get behind the scenes, and we're going to have Randy Mueller on in the second hour. A lot of these guys know who they're going to hire the minute they fire. a coach, and that's the way it is. And I don't know how you fix it, but this is a big mess for the NFL. We'll just leave it at that, because I want to get back to the Eagles with you, and I want to get back to the Senior Bowl, because with the Howie Rosemans was there, and Jeff Stoutland, as you mentioned, and obviously all the scouts are there. The owner's son was there, poked up on the sidelines. Have we started the succession plan? Jeffrey Lurie's 70 years old, and obviously wants to keep the Philadelphia Eagles in the family. Is Julian Lurie going to be a name Eagles fans got to get used to quickly?
Sure sounds like it. And if you're asking me if I have a problem with it, I certainly don't. You know, he went to Harvard, presumably a pretty bright guy. He's been around the team, around the business, the front office side of things. And, you know, I have a son who's 25 years old, and he went to NYU, and he's a very smart kid. And if I owned a football team, you're darn right I would have him riding shotgun with me through the whole process and, you know, be grooming him to take over. And I know what he's doing in his life at the age of 25, which is pretty good. So yeah, I have no problem with Julian Lurie stepping in. I think he's a very heavy analytical type of guy. He really follows the analytics, but you know, the Eagles are doing a lot of that anyway. That's kind of how he was raised within that front office, is with the analytics. So I think it's a fine succession plan. It certainly beats selling it to somebody else and having him threaten to maybe move it out of town. You know, the Eagles out of town, that would really suck. But
I don't think you have to worry about that. Back in the day, you had to worry about it, but not now. Yeah.
I don't think Jeff Lurie's going to be selling to Norman Brayman or Leonard Toews. So I don't think you have to worry about either of those two. Yeah. I don't want to take you another direction, Ed, but Senior Bowl related as John went. Couple of your compatriots, Eagle beat guys who were down there in Mobile, said that the Eagles were paying some pretty good attention to the quarterbacks who were in Mobile, Alabama this week. And it was just a matter of weeks ago that Howie Roseman said emphatically, Doug Peterson emphatically, that Jalen Hurts is the Eagles quarterback. As my partner likes to point out, they weren't under oath at the time, so they could change their mind. Most people thought changing their mind meant either acquiring a Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson. Are the Eagles going to throw us all a curveball and draft a quarterback with one of those 3 first-round picks, Ed Kracz?
It depends how much they fall in love with one. I mean, they're doing their due diligence. I mean, you know, it was reported by Chrissy Freud, who works for SI, that, you know, the Eagles did meet with Carson Strong out of Nevada. So I think it's just due diligence. I don't think they're going to spend one on the first round unless, you know, maybe Kenny Pickett's sitting there at 15 or 16 and they love Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral or whoever. I don't think so, though. I think, if anything, Howie would probably trade one of those picks and try to get a pick in 2023 and just make 2 first-round picks. But I don't think they're going to go quarterback. I think there are so few quarterbacks that are going to go in the first round that if the Eagles want one of these top 7 guys, the 6 who are at the Senior Bowl and Matt Corral who isn't, I think you could see the Eagles possibly taking one on day 2 in the second round. Because listen, I wrote about the history of the Eagles drafting quarterbacks, and since 2010, they've drafted 6 quarterbacks. So that's an 11-year, 12-year span. That's 1 quarterback on average every 2 years. The last quarterback they took was Jalen Hurts in 2020. So I believe they're going to take a quarterback. Huh?
They're due.
They're due.
Take a quarterback per your numbers.
That's my contention, is they're due, and they are going to take one. I just don't think it's going to be in the first round unless there's somebody they really love during this whole process that's still there at 15. But if not, I think they'll take one on day 2.
Well, it's interesting because they do have, as you mentioned, they start the process with the 3 first-round picks, numbers 15, 16, 19, as we stand here today, Ed. And does that create a sense of urgency, not only from the draft perspective, but them as assets, in the fact that you can go and get a quarterback, whether it's a veteran, trade, whatever you want to do? But the point I'm trying to get to is you don't often have 3 first-round picks. you don't often have this capital to make a move to um, do anything you want to do. In essence, now you might have to overpay a little bit to get a Russell Wilson or somebody of that nature. But in theory, if you can convince him to come here, you can get it done because you have the capital. Does that increase the sense of urgency at all? And I've heard, and I'm in this camp as well, Ed. I don't think they're taking 3 first-round picks. I think they're going to try to trade one, but that doesn't mean you can trade one. You know, I think people are just assuming, well, they'll kick one back and they'll get an extra one in 2023. That's not as easy as people might think. So does having the 3 first-round picks right now create a sense of urgency for Howie Roseman?
Listen, I think they're going to build the team around Jalen Hurts. I honestly do. I mean, and we all know why the Eagles have 3 first-round picks, right, John? Because Anthony Patch and Andy Weidel did a great job getting him. It wasn't because of anything Howie Roseman did, right? Howie Roseman gets no credit for getting 3 first-round picks. It's very rare, you're right. And you have to give Roseman credit for that. But I don't think it's a sense of urgency to find a quarterback. I mean, I think they are genuinely happy with Jalen Hurts. And, this whole Russell Wilson speculation, Deshaun Watson, I mean, it makes for good, print media to write stories about, sports talk radio, doing conversations with. But I just don't see it. I mean, Nick Sirianni was emphatic when he said, there are no secrets here. Jalen Hurts is our guy. How do you walk that statement back in the offseason in that locker room with that team who is fully behind Jalen Hurts? And Devontae Smith, it was interesting, said on Sirius Radio the other day that Jalen Hurts called him after the Cincinnati Bengals won the AFC Championship and said, did you see that? He goes, that can be us. We can do that. I mean, there are people in that locker room that love Jalen Hurts. And
there is. But can I tell you how I would walk it back, Ed? I'll tell you right now how I would walk it back. I wouldn't say anything. I would say, guys, this is Russell Wilson.
Right. Can he show you? Can he show you his Super Bowl ring?
That's how I would walk it back. And trust me, they would. It's sort of like the same thing. I was worried about Nick Sirianni and how he would be accepted in that locker room because so many people in that locker room love Doug Peterson. But those guys know it's a business. They go through it every year. And ultimately, look, there were some questions. I mean, I don't think it's pretty evident Fletcher wasn't happy early in the season. But Nick Sirianni slowly won everybody over, and they gave him a chance. Doesn't mean they don't like Doug Peterson because they like Doug Peterson. But I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think they love Jalen Hurts. And they love to have Russell Wilson. I think those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
I don't know. I think it's a young locker room. I think they're all in on Jalen Hurts. I think you bring a 33 or 34-year-old guy in here who was on the back half or back quarter of his career. I'm not sure that's an easy sell. And you mentioned that it took, Sirianni some time to win over that locker room with the veterans. I think if you get rid of Hurts, it's going to take time to win over that locker room, whether it's Watson or Wilson, because I just think they're so all in on Hurts, and they really believe that they're building something as a young core that's going to lead to success over these next couple of years. And I think if you drop that bomb, if you will, into the middle of that locker room, that's going to be tough to overcome, in my opinion.
All right, last thing from me, I need help from one of you two guys. So I'll ask you, Ed, and if you don't know, I'll turn to John. Boston Scott is a 2-sport star? I know he's a good touchdown scorer against the New York Giants, but what the hell else can he do well enough that he's now considered a professional athlete? It goes right over my head. I don't get the whole gaming thing. Can you guys explain this to me?
Let's see if Ed does.
Well, I'm kind of hoping John writes something about it because I certainly don't understand it.
Well, he's really good. I was told he's really good at a race car game where the race cars play soccer. He's really elite at it. So he's a 2-sport athlete. That's what I was told.
Hey, I know gaming's huge though, right? I mean,
it is.
Yeah, and but I don't really pay attention. I don't play video games.
No, I don't.
But listen, Boston Scott's what, 25 years old? I mean, sure, he's right in that wheelhouse of that generation, the big video games. So that's pretty cool, actually, that he's
yeah. But I know he's really, really good at it. Like it's not like he's top, not even 1%, like top 0.1% or something like that. So he's really good at it to a almost frightening degree, evidently. That's all I know.
More power to him, but it is something that I just don't comprehend. But that's okay. Hey, if he's got another gig that he can spend some quality time with during the off season, put a couple extra bucks in his pocket, more power to him. Maybe he'll play for less for the Eagles. No, nobody takes less money because of their other gig.
Yeah.
Tom Brady always got his millions, despite the fact they had a wife who was making it 2 or 3-fold more than he was.
Yeah.
All right, Ed, we need you to get on the record. Who's winning the Pro Bowl?
I was
Come on, this is huge.
Yeah. I don't even know who play. I don't think it's AFC versus NFC. I don't even know who. Is it? Or did they do
gamers
that
against non-gamers? If that's I want Boston Scott on my team.
Yeah, right. I actually, you know what? I want Boston Scott working out 8 hours a day. I don't want him wasting any time on video games. I want him in that weight room.
That's going to come back to haunt him in this.
Yeah. I want him in the playbook, man.
They're going to say his hands are too weak from playing the video games, or
right. That carpal tunnel syndrome that develops. Yeah. I don't know if it's NFC or AFC, but I'm an NFC guy. I know Jody's an AFC guy. I'm going NFC, Jody. I'll bet $1 the NFC East wins, or the NFC.
I think the NFC is favored by 27.5. So I'll take the AFC plus the 27. I don't know.
All right, I'll just say this. I'll end it with this. Ed Kracz, SI.com. You see it there. Eagle Maven. Follow him on Twitter at KratzE. SI.com/NFL/Eagles. You can read me there as well. Devontae Smith, the biggest controversy of the week. 166-pound kid saying he doesn't like cheesesteaks. Do we have to trade him now?
That's your question? No. He don't have to. Don't trade Devontae.
He got a lot of heat. He got a lot of heat for that.
Well, listen. People are very provincial about their cheesesteaks and soft pretzels. I'm fine with it, man. Whatever your diet is, as long as you're successful.
Yeah. That's immediately what I said. Now, if you ask me the question, it's valid. If you ask you the question, it's valid. He's 166 pounds. He's not eating a lot of cheesesteaks. Use your common sense.
No, he could put on a couple pounds. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So I'm not running him out of town, but I would suggest he rethink his cheesesteak stance. Eddie, good stuff, buddy. We'll have you on next week prior to the game that actually matters. I know I'm underselling the Pro Bowl. We don't even know if it's the AFC against the NFC. John is singing the praises of the challenges.
I'm telling you. Go to NFLs.com, their Twitter account. Watch some of the highlights. Some good stuff. Some good one-handed catches. The race was fun with Micah Parsons. But I didn't watch it. I wasn't going that far. But I watched a few clips. I'd recommend it.
I had more important things to do, like watching Odd Couple reruns than yesterday.
They were playing dodgeball. Darius Slay had a great moment playing dodgeball. You should check that out.
But you're worried about Boston Scott playing video games, but you're cool with Darius Slay playing dodgeball? Yeah. No, put that ball down, Darius. We need you to cover next
year. What did they say in the movie? Duck, dip, dodge, and I think duck again or something. It was a great movie.
No. I'm still thinking of the Odd Couple reruns. I don't know where you're watching it, but I love that show. I would love to check that out this week.
The Decade Channel. It should be on your cable if you're Comcast every day at 5 o'clock. 2 episodes, 5 and 5:30.
Excellent.
For The Odd Couple.
I'm an Oscar Madison fan, Jody McDonald.
Hey, he's my idol. I have tried to be Oscar Madison for the last 30 years and unfortunately failed. Eddie Kracz, never a failure when we've got you on. Thank you much for doing so. We'll talk to you next Friday.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the game.
Yes, the big game, the huge game, the Pro Bowl. Who cares about the Pro Bowl? All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, we are the Mac and Mac guys. We'll come back, kick a couple things around. Randy Mueller, former general manager, both the Saints and the Dolphins, executive of the year in the year 2000, going to hop aboard with us in hour number 2 on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
You know you like being right. That's why you should enroll in an Independence Blue Cross plan. It's the health plan chosen by more people than any other, with more doctors and hospitals, more benefits that really rock, more of the coverage you want for the right price, including free doctor visits 24/7. It's a choice you can feel good about, because when you're right, you're right. And when you've got Independence Blue Cross, you're right where you need to be. Call 1-844-200-2583 today to get an Independence Blue Cross plan.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hour number 2 coming your way on a Football Friday here on Bird 365. You got the Mac and Mac guides. We are more than a week out, 9 days away from Super Bowl 56. But we're only a couple days ahead of the all-important Pro Bowl. And, John, I looked during the break. Not all wagering outlets have put up a betting line on the Pro Bowl yet. Some have, some haven't. They actually wait on this because they know it's not going to be big money that they're handling, but the diehards will find a way to get in before the game actually starts. And they're still making adjustments to the rosters, guys deciding whether they're going to play or not play.
I love that matters. The adjustments to the roster.
That they have to have some reason for not putting a line out on it yet. But one place that I have found that has put a line out on it has it as a pick 'em. All right, way to go out there on a limb.
Pick 'em. Well, let me ask you this: I can't even get to the pick 'em. Is it NFC versus AFC? Am I conflating that with the NBA? They changed,
correct.
Team,
whatever. They do a draft in the NFL, in the NBA. So it's Team LeBron against, I think it's Team Durant again this year, even though Durant's not going to play in the game. He's going to choose up sides with LeBron. But I think it's the AFC against the NFC. And it's a pick 'em. And the over-under, Johnny, maybe you jump in on the over-under, 61.5, which is high, but they don't play a lot of defense.
Yeah, I'm going to go over. All right. I'll say that. I'm going to go over for the reason that it's in Las Vegas, so it's in Allegiant Stadium, and that's indoors, so you're not going to worry about anything of that nature. So I'm going to go over. But I will say this, because I knew I remembered, Jody. So I just looked it up real quick. At one point, because for some reason it stuck into my mind, Michael Irvin had a team one year at the Pro Bowl.
Right, they drafted.
Yeah, and it was Team Irvin beat Team Rice one year. Team Jerry Rice against Team Michael Irvin, which, by the way, and the NBA, as I mentioned, does that. I don't know. That makes it even worse. Like, to me, it makes it even worse. At least if I know it's AFC versus NFC, if it's Eastern Conference versus, at least I get it. I know who's where. It makes it even worse. Do you enjoy that? I know you don't enjoy any format like me, but doesn't that make it worse?
The reason why I thought it was ridiculous with the football was, at least in basketball, it's only 24 guys. And you can get it over and done with in the better part of an hour. Just boom, 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 back and forth, draft pick. You got to fill out a whole roster. You tell me Michael Irvin's doing the research on getting together the perfect roster? Stop it. You know that it's just window dressing. So, yeah, it annoyed the snot out of me when football did it. Basketball's not near as bad, and they do a nice job. Turner always does it with the actual draft night going back and forth between the two guys. It actually can be entertaining. Then to me, it has no effect on a game. It's just a bunch of guys playing schoolyard basketball, running up and down, and there's no continuity. There's no really.
I'm a traditionalist. I want to see Eastern Conference versus Western Conference. I want to see NFC versus AFC. But then again, I don't want to see any of it. So I guess it doesn't matter.
But they have a hell of a skills competition, according to John McMullen.
Yeah, I thought it was. Well, here's how I'll describe it. I think it's better than the game. How about that? I don't think it's great. I think it's better than the game to see guys out there having some fun at least and playing some dodgeball.
Doesn't neither one moves me much. I'll leave it at that. Want to double down on something I brought up with Ed and want to get your take on it. Again, trusting the guys that you know as well as you do, spending in the time in the Eagles press box with them or on the road press box with them on a week in, week out basis. A couple of guys did go down to Mobile to keep an eye on the power brokers that be for the Philadelphia Eagles and what they're checking in and checking out on as far as the Senior Bowl players in practice go. And more than one noted that the Eagles were spending some serious time both watching and interviewing the quarterbacks that are down there this week. I'm with you, J Mac, and Ed is less with both of us. If they get a deal that they think they can make for Russell Wilson, I think they're going to do it. And I think the fact that they paid homage to Jalen Hurts will be quickly moved over. Deshaun Watson is, for me, less of a possibility, but a possibility just the same, that if given a chance, they'll attempt to come up with a deal to get Deshaun Watson here. Those are the only two. I don't think they've got a prayer at Aaron Rodgers. I don't think they'd move off Jalen Hurts to go get, say, a Derek Carr, who is a quarterback who may or may not shake out in Oakland this year since they're turning things around there with a new general manager and a new coach. I think it's two guys. I think it's Russell Wilson and the Deshaun Watson. Other than that, I think Jalen Hurts is going to be back as the quarterback. But I believe that they would move away from it despite the fact that they said, no, Jalen's our guy. Or are they? Are they really? Because they are infamous. Some things about this Eagle organization are infamous over the years. They are the quarterback factory. They're on the record as saying it. And I know pain in the rear end, media guys like me always bring it up just to remind everybody that was said. I don't think anybody's forgotten. And I do think there's something to that they pride themselves on their ability to first evaluate and then groom and make the most of quarterbacks, maybe overly so. But is that going to happen this year? Are they going to pull one out of left field and actually draft the quarterback in the first round and have an actual competition for the starting quarterback of the Eagles next year?
I think it's a possibility for this reason, Jody, because they have the 3 first-round picks, as you mentioned, 15, 16, 19. Look, I think you can't get caught up in groupthink, as I always like to say. So just because on February 4th, somebody's saying none of these quarterbacks are worthy of going certain spot, wherever, top 10, top 20, whatever. You got to do your own due diligence. You got to trust your own scouts, your own convictions. And that's why you go talk. People make a big deal out of it. You talk to everybody at these things that you can talk to. And that's why you're there, to evaluate players. That's all you're doing. You're evaluating players. Kenny Pickett's the one guy to sit there and say, okay, now if that kid starts falling to 15, I think you seriously got to start talking about taking him. And then here's to me, it's always been, okay, you got door one, Jalen Hurts is your starter. Boom. Everybody wants to say that. Door two, you go out and get Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, as you mentioned. Boom, you do that. What about door three? And that you do what we always do, what they've tried to do in the past, have more darts for the dartboard. You have Jalen Hurts. He's cost effective. He's still under his rookie deal. And kid you really like falls to 15, 16, 19, which I think the most likely name is Kenny Pickett that they would like. I don't think he'll be there. But if he is there, why can't you take him? And not to be the starter, just like they did before with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was originally to be the backup. Then you spin off Gardner Minshew for a day 3 pick. There's all the things you can do. And then people say, well, look what it did to Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts isn't Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts is not going to be a shrinking violet if they bring in Kenny Pickett. And then you have two chances. Kenny Pickett sits there as a reserve, learns. People forget Patrick Mahomes learned under Alex Smith for a year, sat for a year. Aaron Rodgers sat for a number of years under Brett Favre, but that's going back too far. It doesn't happen often, but it still happens. In this way, you have two shots at it. And the only reason I bring that up as a potential possibility is because they have the 3 first-round picks. And if you're forced to take them, why not take another swipe at the apples, another bite at the apple, so to speak? Why not? If you like the kid, but everything comes down to evaluation, obviously.
I'll give you another potential line of thinking. And if it's accurate, I love it if the Eagles are playing this game. That they're doing this for show. That they're interviewing Carson Strong, that they're ogling Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis and everyone else. Because when they get there, when the pick pops up, when it's their selection, if there's a team out there that is more desperate to get a quarterback than the Eagles, and they actually think the Eagles may take that quarterback, then they're aggressively going to try up and get the Eagles pick. That they want to trade into a spot to be able to acquire that quarterback, whereas the Eagles really aren't as in love with the quarterback as they may have shown that week down in Mobile, and maybe they only have to drop back a couple of spots. Last year was one of the more successful drafts the Eagles have had in the last decade. What did Harry Roseman do? He traded back, not a lot, from, what was it? 6 to
12, and then back to 10.
And then 12 back up to 10. Not a massive move in either one of them. Only 6 spots. It wasn't like he traded all the way out of the first round. He traded back 6 spots. Then he moved up 2 spots. Maybe there's a team out there that wants to get their hands on Malik Willis when number 16 comes up on the board. Kenny Pickett gets taken in the top 10. Maybe Matt Corral as well. Maybe there's a team that loves Malik Willis. So they let people believe that they may be looking at Malik Willis. So, hey, you want to move up from 18 to 16? Well, we'd be willing to do that if you give us an extra pick. Howie Roseman, that's one of his strong suits as far as I'm concerned. He's good at doing that during the draft maneuver deal type thing. Maybe this is just a way to put themselves out there for other organizations to think, damn, we got to be able to get in front of a play because the Eagles
I will say, Jody, I think you're right in the fact that, look, they don't want to take 3 first-round picks. I said their first choice to me would be to spin one off and get out and try to get an extra first-round pick in 2023 when the quarterback, and it's way too early, but people are going to do that, when the quarterback class is supposed to be better than it is this year. The only thing I hesitate about is what I just said. You know, go back to Patrick Mahomes draft again. You know, Mitchell Trubisky was number 2. And then it was Patrick Mahomes at number 10. And then it was Deshaun Watson at number 12. You know, people were taking shots at Patrick Mahomes. I was one of them. I thought his mechanics were awful. Guess what? His mechanics are awful. Andy Reid took a lot of heat from going up, I think, from 27 to 10. He went up a long way and gave up a lot to get Patrick Mahomes. And he was getting killed. You know, you can go online and read all the stories. They're still there. Obviously, there's revisionist history now. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. A lot of people criticize Deshaun Watson. And again, this is off the field. I'm talking only on the field about his potential to be a starting quarterback in this league. And everybody thought Mitchell Trubisky. And now Ryan Pace gets killed for it and should. And he lost his job. And he should have lost his job. But Ryan Pace wasn't the only one. The groupthink in the NFL at the time was that Mitchell Trubisky was better than Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. That was where the groupthink got you. So my point is, if you like a quarterback, like Andy Reid had the courage of his convictions, and you believe in a kid, I don't care what NFL draft and insert whomever says. That's why you can't get caught up in that stuff. And that's what the Eagles are doing. But you're right in the avenue of they probably don't want to take 3 first-round picks. So I will agree with you. And they want to create urgency so someone will want to get into that spot so they can spin that off.
That's what I think. Cowie may be playing a game, and it could be an effective one. And by the way, I thought Deshaun Watson was better than Mitch Trubisky. I didn't fall into the.
Well, I didn't say you did, but a lot of people thought Mitchell Trubisky was going to be a good player.
I did. Watson 1, Mahomes 2, Trubisky 3 was my ranking of the 3 quarterbacks. And Mahomes is the best. So while I'm patting myself on the back, not all that hard, because I had Mahomes the second best quarterback, not the best quarterback, but I had them both ahead of that stiff Mitch Trubisky. All right, Johnny Mac with John McMullen. We are the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Coming up next, former executive of the year and NFL GM in both Miami and New Orleans. Our buddy Randy Mueller joins us on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
You know you like being right. That's why you should enroll in an Independence Blue Cross plan. It's the health plan chosen by more people than any other, with more doctors and hospitals, more benefits that really rock, more of the coverage you want for the right price, including free doctor visits 24/7. It's a choice you can feel good about, because when you're right, you're right. And when you've got Independence Blue Cross, you're right where you need to be. Call 1-844-200-2583 today to get an Independence Blue Cross plan.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Appreciate you tuning in to Birds 365 with John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We are lucky to have our next guest join us, former executive in the league, GM for both the Dolphins and the Saints. His podcast, Life in the Front Office, is a must listen to for all you NFL fans. Randy Mueller joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Randy?
I'm doing great, guys. Good morning. I always get a little nervous when Jody starts talking about stiffs and then he introduces me a couple minutes later. So I hope there's no correlation there, but I'll do my best.
No correlation. Poor Mitch Trubisky got the reference today. Randy, my first question, how much media have you done this week and how many times have you talked about the Super Bowl, actually?
Yeah, that's a great point. Seems like this is the week off, so there's not much Super Bowl, but as we all know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the league, and some of it's has to be addressed. I'll say that. So that seems to be taking the first position in everybody's line of questioning. That's for sure.
Well, you obviously you did a good piece on MuellerFootball.com. I was really interested in because you've hired and been in that process, head coaches over the years. You talked about building relationships. Has the NFL set up teams for failure when it comes to the Rooney Rule? In essence, you have to. People have called it checking the box, right. And bottom line is the legislation forces you to interview candidates, and maybe you've already decided on a candidate that you wanted. So while I think it's altruistic, is it good policy, the Rooney Rule?
I think it served its purpose. I think it's a little old and played, to be honest with you. I've been at a lot of meetings, guys, before, and in committee meetings and at fancy resorts with owners where they decide to bring in X amount of potential coaches that are assistants around the league and get to know them and this and that. I just never have found the dialogue to mean much. I found it to be very surfacey. I found it to be really not relationship building in the comfort level that, say, you or I would build a relationship. So I just think it's tired, it's played. Now, that's not to say that owners are going to hire whoever they want. I'll give them, it's their ball, right? We're just all pawns in the game. But I'll say this, the GMs hold some responsibility as well. And I was happy to see a couple minority GMs get jobs this year. I think there's progress being made there. And some of that is because of the Rooney Rule. But I also think that we can dive deeper into the relationship part. And that's what I wrote at my blog site was, I just think it is about relationships. And I think we've got to build and bond those relationships at a lower level than at a fancy resort with owners. Whether you're wearing fancy sandals or coat and tie, it doesn't really matter. I just think you've got to find ways to do this. And I used this as an example. If you got 10 seconds, let me just run through this. This was my example of it. Chris Broussard and Rob Parker are two hosts on Fox Sports Radio. I didn't know either one at all. And I've done a piece with them every week for the last 6 or 8 months. Every week I go on their show. We built a relationship where that I'm very trustworthy of these guys. I think they like me. I think we get along great. Come from all different angles, total different perspectives on life. But we've learned about each other through this business relationship to where it's almost like we've worked together now. And present company excluded, if I was going to hire a radio host, I would talk to these guys and consider doing that. That's how good I feel about them. Well, this can be carried over into football, I think, as well. We just haven't done a good enough job of kindling those relationships and starting them at a lower level and then just see where it goes. Because like I said in the piece, I think those who hire coaches sometimes have an idea who they want to hire even before the process starts. And I think that allows you to build these relationships, and communicating's hard. Building relationships is hard, as we all know in our own homes every day. whether it's on the street or inside our house with kids or whatever. Communicating's hard. But when you do it over a period of time, you find a comfort level with the people you're communicating with. And I just found that as an example of what I think we don't do a good enough job in the NFL is we need to work on building relationships at a lower level. And let's just say the owners don't know these, candidates. It's up to the GMs to know it and sell it above them. They've got to know who the candidates are. They've got to have relationships with all kinds of candidates, all colors of candidates, and get to know them really well. And then it's up to the GMs to take some responsibility in this too and sell that, if you believe in that, to the ownership or people above you within your own building. Sorry to be long-winded, but
No,
I have a little passion with this, and I hope we change enough of it to where we can actually, sit here 4 or 5 years from now and say, wow, we've come a ways.
Randy, let me try and even tie the structure together a little bit more. You made a great point about how key relationships are in all these hirings and decisions that are made. I'm on record as saying, and my father's an ex-professional general manager in Major League Baseball, but not in football. But the structure and the belief and the building of teams is very similar. And my father always believed that the most important relationship in the team is the general manager and the coach. That if they're on the same page and they're working hand in hand, that you've got your best chance for success. And my father was given a lot of latitude in hiring the managers when he was a general manager. I don't think that's as much in place in the NFL, that the owners are much more involved in the hiring of the coaches. You were the GM for a couple teams, you work for a couple other teams. What is the best structure for getting it right across the board? The general manager, the coach, how much involvement is the owner? Should the owner just hire the general manager and then let the general manager pick the coach? Should the owner hire the coach for it and let him pick the general manager? Because John and I were talking earlier about the situation in Jacksonville, where the coach hiree wanted to dictate who the general manager should be, which to me is kind of a little back-ass word, but that's just me. Right. What is the best way to line up the ducks to get it right within an NFL organization?
Well, here's the way I look at it, and I've told this story many times. I've worked under a coach, I've worked at level with a coach, and I've been the coach's boss. The relationship was always the same. We did things together no matter what. I never forced it if I was the boss. I never forced it if I was pushing an agenda underneath him. I think if you can't agree at that point, you go in a different lane. So I don't know that the structure is paramount in that. I think it's more important on how they work together. And I think what we've seen in a lot of NFL buildings now is there seems to be an agenda at work within these buildings, whether it's dictated by ownership or other people within the organization. They build a little tiny box because they don't want their own agenda or their own kingdom altered at all. And then they place these people in it, whether it's a GM, let's just say in New York for the Giants, they have a lot of people in play there. They build a little box for the GM. They interchange coaches, and I think coaches have really been devalued because of all these things the last few years, because they're plugging them in more like baseball has become, where they just plug the manager in and he dictates or the lineup cards are dictated to him. So there's a lot of that involved, but I just think there are a lot of agendas at work in these NFL buildings, and that's what's caused some of the pain and some, personality greats, but everybody's protecting their own turf. And that's not the way the NFL used to be. You would hire a GM and he's going to work with, obviously the owner has final say, but you're going to work with all the people in the building to make sure we hire the right person to lead our football team as a coach. But I just think we've gotten away from that because we're trying to do too many things and please too many masters within these NFL buildings.
That's interesting, Randy, because I hadn't thought of it in a similar way to baseball and coaches being devalued. Because there seems to be a bit of it, and I know you and I are probably agreeing on the groupthink and the philosophy and the same list, and everybody works off the same list, and then occasionally you'll get a curveball. That's been going on for years, but now we have this sort of template, and I don't want to disparage. But you look at the Sean McVay tree, and it's like, okay, Sean's successful, 2 Super Bowls, and he'll get an opportunity to win his first next weekend. But when it comes to devaluing of coaches, and is it become more of a status where you are dictating to them what you want? Because we went through Doug Peterson. I'm happy Doug got the job in Jacksonville. 3 years off a Super Bowl title. He was fired here in Philadelphia. He's got a lot of cachet, or he should, but he didn't seem to have a lot of cachet around this league. Right. Where's that disconnect?
Well, I think it streams back to who has the owner's ears within a building per se. I think there's a lot of people in the owner's ears. There's a lot of people telling them how important they are and how we don't need this or don't need that because we have that covered. And so we're just going to hire a coach to roll out game plans every week. It's similar with GMs as well. I find very seldom does the most qualified guy get the GM job anymore in the NFL. It's really who fits within the agendas of the people in the building. And that's a, I'm not sure that's good for ball. It's good for the people that are involved, that's for sure. But I'm not sure it's good for football, for the game going forward. So, yeah, I think everybody has a say in their little part of running an organization, as they should. But it seems like they have more say than, say, a traditional GM used to have or a traditional coach used to have. So it's almost like everybody's been devalued for the sake of working together, which I've always done. And I think everybody that have had a GM job in the 80s or 90s or even early 2000s, everybody worked together. That wasn't it. It might be as much about personality as anything else. Like you say, cachet, a little, they don't want too much of a leader, too much of a personality. We found that out a little bit with Brian Flores in Miami. They didn't want too much, they wanted a coach. So we'll see. I don't know. It's a tough dynamic to measure because every franchise is different and every franchise needs a different type of coach, which obviously feeds off a different type of a GM as well.
Randy, following up what John asked you about and the point that you made about devaluating coaches. John and I have mentioned on the show many times that the preferable thing to do with a coaching position is if you get a guy who's good, try and hold on to him. Continuity is always better than constant change. So we would like to see that happen. If you're a fan of a team, that's what you want to see happen. I want to ask you about a specific team that you know because you worked for him, but before the guy who just was a longtime coach decided to step away. Sean Payton decided he had had enough in New Orleans, and he's going to take a year off, maybe do some announcing. Hadn't said he'll never coach again, but he did pass on being the Saints coach, even though he had time left to go on his contract this year. How difficult position are the Saints in right now? That they have to replace a guy like that. That if you don't have to get constant turnover in the coaching position, then you get a guy that's good enough to stick around for a decade and a half, and then you get kind of thrown into the fray and not know that it was coming. How difficult is it going to be for the Saints because they're now down to one of just 3 teams without a coach? Are they in a tough spot this offseason?
Well, it's definitely a tough spot for them because they've got some other issues to deal with too. Obviously, they're trying to find a quarterback. Their cap has been somewhat of a mess. So they've got 2 or 3 pushback areas with regard to running their total organization. I think in their case, and everybody's really, they have built a criteria. I know Mickey, I know their front office. I probably am tied to there as anybody. They all know their criteria of what they want. They have assessed where they're at without Sean. Now they set a criteria as to what we want going forward. And I think that's why you see some of the names that they do. I don't think they need to start a total new program and change everything. And I think they feel pretty good about their roster for the most part. Obviously, they'd like to have more depth, but I think that's why you see the Dennis Allens, the guys who have been tied to there in the past, that they don't think they need a ton of change. So there's a fine line there between carrying on what Sean has done there and the culture, but yet freshening it enough to where they can still bring in new ideas. So I think that's their dilemma right now is they're caught between a rock and a hard spot in that we all deal with curveballs, not necessarily of our coach walking out the door, but we all have to deal with curveballs at an NFL level, especially. So I'm happy they have a guy like Mickey Loomis who's seen a lot, who's been through a lot, who won't make a knee-jerk reaction and kind of has a view of from 30,000 feet as to what his team is. And I think that's a lot of these jobs get filled around the league. I think in the criteria that the group sets isn't exactly accurate, or almost like they need some independent eyes to help them set the criteria. Some teams think they're better than others. Some teams thinks they're, and therefore they hire, think everything's great. You mentioned Jacksonville. They think they can just plug another coach in, whether it's Doug or whoever, and be fine. Well, I think they probably need a few more things to be changed than that. But sometimes self-assessment is the hardest part of it. But I do think the Saints will get a good coach. I don't think they will fare far from the tree. They'll bring in, I think, somebody who has some tie to either having been with Sean or that system before they make a decision.
You mentioned an independent eye, Randy. And this might be a difficult question to answer, but we are where we are in this cycle, and Doug's the latest hire, and we're talking about the Rooney Rule because of Brian Flores. There's only a few teams left. Houston has sort of made Brian a finalist, along with Jonathan Gannon and Josh McCown, two Eagles tinted candidates there. All of a sudden, New Orleans, Eric Bieniemy's on the list. Miami, Mike McDaniel seems to be the leader in the clubhouse. We'll see how that shakes out. Is there any push from the league to say, the Saints, to use the Saints, you have a good relationship with Mickey, say, hey, do us a solid, take a look at Eric Bieniemy? Is there any push like that going on from this league, do you think?
I don't know. That's a hard one. I'd say this, John, over my time in the league, I was never really pushed, never really suggested to me what kind of a decision or what kind of action to take from the league. I never heard of it, but I mean, it could be, it would be all speculation on my part. I would think the right thing to do, forgetting the racial part of it, is that you're going to interview anybody you think's qualified. And I think Mickey has to do that. I think he's done that a little bit already. So I don't know that you would need a push from the league. I'm sure the league, hey, present climate, in the mix, would love to see minorities get more time in front of, any interviews, but, time will tell. I just think the Saints are going to have to do what's right for them at the end of the day. And if it happens to be that it is a minority that gets the job, that's because they will have thought that that's the best route to go.
Randy, do want to ask you about something else that's going on in the National Football League, not hiring of new coaches. This is the Senior Bowl week, and a lot of people from the National Football League are down in Mobile, Alabama. You had a bunch of different positions leading up to becoming a general manager. So you filled a lot of roles, wearing a lot of shoes. What is the thing that you can achieve in Senior Bowl week that gives you an edge over everybody else? Everyone's there. Everybody's asking questions. Everybody's scouting. Is there something that you did, you noticed over time? You said, I've got to track that going forward because it's telltale. Was there anything that you ever picked up out of all your Senior Bowl experience? You said, yeah, here's a key aspect that we need to continue to monitor year after year.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, to be honest with you. And I'll try to stay as positive as I can, because I'm all for what they're doing in Mobile. And I would say this, year after year after year, I would go down there with our staff, and we would come back, and especially, and I'm talking about coaching staff, and our coaches would come back, and a lot of times they would have reasons to not like certain players. We're there to evaluate. But here's the thing you got to remember. Most of these players haven't done much since Thanksgiving, right? They've been sitting around for 6 weeks. So I always took this into account. Let's just say it's an offensive line coach that's down there, and he's seeing a guy play guard for the first time ever, and he has done nothing for 6 weeks. How do you think he's going to look, Jody? Not very good. Yeah. The drills are all set up for the defense to win anyway, in pass rush and all the other stuff. So when you go down there, you just got to be a little careful. So I kind of surmised after many years was, should I even have the offensive line coach there? Do I want his first impression of a player to be this? Because we get anchored on our position, right? A lot of times you try not to, but so the offensive line coach goes and he comes back and he's ripping apart these guys. Well, Let's go look at some film. The one thing, so from that, I said, okay, we're going to keep doing this. Let's make sure our coaches have seen some real film before we go down there. Make sure they see some school visit film that our scouts saw. So we're starting from an impression of, hey, I've seen already 3 or 4 games of this guy, so I know what he's been asked to do in his college. That's one, a little bit of a negative sense that you got to be aware of. The other one, what really became a lot, and we did this tons when I was in Miami with Nick Saban, we really spent more time interviewing players. It was a great chance for us to get to know them personally. If you weren't coaching the game, we set up, and everybody does this now, but back in the day, we didn't do a ton of this. I really didn't do a lot of it until I got with Nick. And we would set up sometimes multiple interview rooms to make sure we had them all covered, because it's quality time you got to spend with these players off the field to get to know them. And so I think those are big things that go a long ways toward evaluating now, is just more interview time, more face-to-face time, more teaching, learning. How does this guy learn best? Does he learn? You know, a lot of ways that you can get to know these players in that setting without even being out at practice. So some of that stuff as well are things that I think they're a little bit, they evolve from year to year, but after you've been there a few years, those were big things for me, the interviews and really how to control the impressions that our coaches get and make sure they understand the background before they start making up, you know, a case for this guy or that guy.
Now, Randy, that's interesting because you as a GM in this league, and any GM or anybody with that sort of job description, has to gather that information from all these different coaches, personnel, scouts. You mentioned the coaching, the relationship there, and that collaboration has become the buzzword in the NFL. But somebody's got to make the decision when it comes down to it. Somebody's got to be in charge. How does that work when you have all these pieces working together, trying to get you or the head coach the proper information? You guys pound the table for certain players. They probably get disappointed if you go in a different direction. Is that the most difficult part of being the GM, keeping everybody on the same page in this league?
I think it is. I also think it's the best part about it, John, to be honest with you. It's the part I miss the most of not being with the team. I love the process. I love just the stuff that you described, getting everybody's input, putting it all together. Just pretend we start with a big, huge blank worksheet and it's empty. There's not a writing on it. But by the end of the spring, it's completely full and you can't see the white paper. So that's really what it is. And it is a process. And the Senior Bowl is just a small sliver of it. One thing we get, you know, influenced by as fans is that there's a lot of people there now, and there's a lot of non-working NFL people there. And so they give impressions of this or that. They control a little bit of social media. They influence the fans that are out there. And yet I always sometimes shake my head as, well, I didn't really see it like that. And what fans got to realize is there may be 10 of these inlets or outlets giving their opinions when you're inside an NFL building. So you've got to control and build them all together to come up with our place where we place a particular player. And these influencers now, they do a lot to really affect the impression of that fans have about players. And then we have to live with it as NFL people. So I would tune out a lot of the noise per se, and the people outside of our building really during that whole process. But you're right, it is a complicated process that starts with, you know, the school visits all fall, and those really matter. So you're gathering that from your scouts, then the Senior Bowl, then the combine, then the workouts, you know, the individual school workouts before you even get to put it all together. And by the way, I kind of want to know as much of this as I can before we even sit down to have free agent meetings. So figure that part into it and add free agency in there as well. So it's a Rubik's Cube, but like I said, that's what kept me going. I love the process of building a consensus on not only players, but of your plan in the offseason.
All right, Randy, 2-part question here. Part 1, and we'll see if we can just agree on it to an extent. Would you say to an extent the NFL is a copycat league?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of times. Yeah.
Good. All right. Then my question is about the Los Angeles Rams. If they should lose this week to the Cincinnati Bengals, will they be viewed as the team that made 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls and did so by pushing all their chips into the middle of the table and saying, draft picks, who needs draft picks? Give us established players. Or will they be looked at the team who pushed all their chips into the table, and the final pot, they got beat again, did by the Patriots 3 years ago, get beat by the Bengals again here. Will teams be more likely to try and follow the Rams' game plan in building a roster, putting together a team? If the Rams win the game, will they be less likely if they lose the game? Will this one outcome of this game change how copycat the Rams are looked at?
Well, I think it's a hard question, Jody. I only hesitate because I'm not sure how the rest of the league will look at it. I look at it like this. I think what they've done is they've made their team better, and I don't think it's all about this year. If you offered me, to swap Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, I'm doing that 10 out of 10 times, and I'm not worried about just doing it for this year. They've added players. Now, they've added some players with lesser contracts, so that someone's going to have to pay the price for some of the decisions they've made. But I don't necessarily think it's all about this year. I think it's about what they've built. They have acquired some later round picks once they've given away first round picks, and they've done a pretty good job of hitting on those mid to late round picks as well. I like the idea of being aggressive. I wish half the teams would consider some of this stuff, but having been around as long as I have, I know teams that wouldn't even answer the phone for this stuff. So they're just not interested in it. They think, they have enough players. I think that's the biggest misnomer in the NFL, is that everybody's trying to be in the middle of every deal and be aggressive. They're not. Some of these teams are very happy with their roster, and that's why I say the independent eye. Some of them I wish they could use a little independent eye to self-assess where they're at. So I don't think this is a case for one and done. I think if the Rams do lose this game, more power to them. They're going to find a way to retool. I think every year's become a retool in the NFL. I don't think a long-range plan is any longer than 2 years, to be honest with you. So you guys have seen that in Philly, how they've moved pieces and people around. And I commend Howie for it. I know he's one of the guys that is in the middle of every deal and trying to be as aggressive as he can to help his team. And he has one eye on the future. I get it. But I like what the Rams have done. I'll be the first to admit that when they did it, I kind of set my pause button a little bit, but then when you really analyze it, they're a better team now than they've been in a long time. So I think they'd do it again, even if they lose this game.
Last one from me, Randy, and everybody should read Randy at MuellerFootball.com. Great GM podcast on the Athletic, best in the business as far as I'm concerned. Former NFL Executive of the Year. Randy, I want to piggyback off that Rams sentiment because I agree with you. I keep hearing people talk about, we need this guy for the next 10 years. Your window's 3 years at the most in the modern NFL. What are you worried about?
Yeah.
So my question to you as a former GM is, when you do have a proven commodity, and we'll use some of the Rams, whether it was, you mentioned Matthew Stafford, you can go to Von Miller, you can even go back to Jalen Ramsey, versus the uncertainty of a first-round pick.
Yeah,
we all know that's how you build your team. You got to hit on draft picks. But, man, why doesn't more GMs in this league value demonstrable performance over the uncertainty of what's going to be analytically a 50-50 shot in the draft?
I think sometimes they get caught up in that they can make a difference with their draft picks. I think there's a little patting themselves on the back. And if we don't have a first round pick, what can I do? There's some of that. Sometimes it's cash. Sometimes it's money. The McVay deal and even the Wentz deal, those teams paid a lot of money to those players and then send them out of town a year or two later. That's an awkward conversation with your owner. The Rams paid Jared Goff a ton of money and then sent him packing not too long after that. So I think the old school thought is, once we decide we're going to pay this guy, we're going to stick with it forever. And sometimes you end up making two wrongs to try to get it right, and it doesn't happen. So I think there are a lot of, GMs that, aren't aggressive. They just don't want to go, and they're not confident. They don't want to go make a deal. The other thing is, sometimes within buildings, you have cap people or you have other agendas that talk you out of things. and that's part of their job. So I'm not, shedding shade on them. It's just part of their jobs. And sometimes the GM has to go out further on a limb. And a lot of them aren't willing to go out on limbs anymore, whether it's the money or whatever, but they've changed kind of their dynamic as well as to how they make decisions.
Randy, it sounds like you appreciate the way the Rams put this team together and were aggressive and got players who are already established. Can I read into that you like them to win the game next Sunday, or is it just you appreciate it and they'll take another shot again next year? No, you like in the Super Bowl?
I do. I like what they've done. I do think they are the better team right now. That's not to say that I don't love Joe Burrow. I know what Joe Burrow is, but I think the Rams are, I just think it's their day. I think they can do more things offensively than the teams that the Bengals have beaten so far. So, I think they'll be willing to run the ball if they have to. Now, if Cam Akers is out, that's a different story. I think that's a big injury to follow. He hasn't practiced much this week. So, but right now, and I reserve my right to change my mind, Jody, next week. But right now, I kind of like the Rams.
Yeah, even though he's an ex-executive, don't kid yourself. He's a good media guy that he knows how to cover his backside a little bit here. But I want to reserve the right to change my mind.
It's early. It's early.
You on the spot. You did a good job dodging it, Randy.
No.
Good on you, my friend.
Thank you.
We appreciate you hopping on board with us. Thank you much. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you again down the road.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Thanks,
Randy Mueller from MuellerFootball.com. Does spots on Fox, his podcast, Life in the Front Office on The Athletic is one of the best football podcasts out there. Thought I could get him. He's good. Well, I reserve the right to change my mind, which he can do. It's 9 days away. I'm trying to put him on the spot early. I thought I could get him to make a pick. I'm not making a pick here. I'm just going to say,
it's way too early. But I like that he went on. I'm on the same path. I think the Rams are the better team. But I got some time before I got to make that pick, Jody.
And I am going to reserve the right to change my mind. The only thing I'm saying today is I'm getting tired of losing to Joe Burrow. He keeps beating. Yeah, he keeps beating everybody. He's got something. He's got
sometimes. They're a team of fate, team of destiny, whatever you want to call it. And then you got the kicker as well, Evan McPherson, who. He's not Justin Tucker, but he's as close to Justin Tucker as you can possibly get. And as a rookie kicker, talk about it. Evan Cool. We can call him that.
Burrow is looking pretty good with that victory cigar, and I think he wants to do one more. I'm not making my pick yet. If Randy Mueller doesn't have to make his, John McMullen doesn't have to make his, I'm not making mine either. But I'm acknowledging that Joe Burrow doesn't like losing, and he's been pretty damn odd this last month and change. All right, come back, put a bow on the show. Final segment of a Football Friday on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
You know you like being right. That's why you should enroll in an Independence Blue Cross plan. It's the health plan chosen by more people than any other, with more doctors and hospitals, more benefits that really rock, more of the coverage you want for the right price, including free doctor visits 24/7. It's a choice you can feel good about, because when you're right, you're right. And when you've got Independence Blue Cross, you're right where you need to be. Call 1-844-200-2583 today to get an Independence Blue Cross plan.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Mac guys here on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, I need to ask you, February 4th, 2018. Do you remember where you were?
I was in Minneapolis still. I was stuck there. I was stuck there for 2 days after the Super Bowl, maybe 3 days. I can't remember that, but yeah, I was in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Bloomington.
This is the 4-year anniversary of when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. This date 4 years ago, February 4th. So you were in the building when the Eagles won that Super Bowl. You referenced it earlier about having some good conversations afterwards with Frank Reich in the locker room and the like. What'd you do afterwards?
After the Super Bowl, I went back to the media room and wrote for about 4 hours. And then I went back to my hotel room and collapsed. And then got up for the Super Bowl winning press conference the next day at the Mall of America.
Very nice.
Yeah, not exciting. Not exciting at all. After that, then I think we hit the bar for a few drinks after that night. But yeah,
so the Monday night was more of a celebration than Sunday night.
Yeah.
Sunday night, you were still on the clock.
Yeah, celebration of a job well done, not celebration of an Eagles victory. That was for the fans.
You guys patting yourselves on the back is what you're telling me.
Yeah. No, well,
okay.
Good for the Eagles, but
you do what you got to do. The Eagles would not allow you to get that job well done had they not won the game. I remember because I used to do the show leading up to the Super Bowl on CBS Sports Radio. I've been a Sunday guy for them for sneaking up on a decade now, and I used to do the 2 to 6 shift. So it was before the Super Bowl. So it was great. I'm like the pregame show to the Super Bowl on CBS Sports Radio. Now I'm actually on against the Super Bowl, which stinks. But your gig is your gig, and you do it as best you can. That night, I got out of there at 5:55 and got in my car. Usually I take the train home. Oh, no, car's faster. I prayed that there was going to be no traffic. I told my wife, because she had like 2 or 3 invitations for us to go with Eagle fan friends to be able to watch the game and celebrate and the like. I said, no, honey, I want to watch this one by myself. I wanted to sit at home and watch the game. And with my wife and my daughter, if they certainly want. I think my daughter went out. She goes, Dad, see you later. Bye. I'm going out with friends. I want to party if the Eagles win the Super Bowl. So it's just me and my wife. And I just wanted to watch the game by myself, pay attention to it, see if they actually won a Super Bowl. I was not in the partying mood. Now, you work too. I worked, but I worked from the comfort of my own couch. But I needed to pay strict attention to that game as I could. And yeah, there was some pretty good celebrating just between me and my wife in the house afterwards.
Yeah, well, yeah. When you're at the game, there's not much celebrating to be done. You gotta get down to the bowels of the building. You got to get down to the locker room. And Minneapolis was set up to where the media workroom was in the office building across the street. So you had to, after all the locker room stuff, I had to try to get over there in, I think, -2 degrees or whatever it was.
How long a walk was
it? No, it wasn't a long walk, but when it's that cold, I lived in that area for about a decade. So it's amazing how you get used to it and then how you get unused to it very, very quickly.
Well, it was a heck of a game just 4 years ago. And ironically enough, on the day that we celebrate 4 years ago that the Eagles won it all, Doug Peterson, the guy in charge, gets back into the mix as he is named the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yes, we're planning on doing this Birds 365 show going forward for who knows how long. We will be on the day that they release the NFL schedule. And as much as Their 2 matchup against the Cowboys. Their 2 matchups against the Commodores. The Commanders. Excuse me. The
Commodores might be better. Yeah, I might want to see the Commodores.
The Commodores. Their 2 matchup against the Giants. Their matchup in Indianapolis against Frank Reich and Carson Wentz. Oh, yeah, I want to know what day they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Eagles get to play Doug Peterson.
Yeah, that's gonna be typically, if it were just normal Jacksonville, that might be the worst game of the year.
Right.
Now it might be the best game of the year.
That's one of the ones that if you're on the secondary ticket market, well, we could move this and it'll pay for the other games that I have to pay for. Oh, no, that'll be one the Eagle fans will be keeping going forward this year. All right, J-Mac, I say we do this again next week. Now, for those out there, the entire JAKIB Media YouTube channel is going to take some time off around the Super Bowl, a couple days before, a couple days after. So you and I got a couple of shows next week to do leading up to the Super Bowl. I will see you on Monday, partner.
I'm looking forward to it. Enjoy the Pro Bowl. Even bigger.
I can't miss the Pro Bowl. We'll be back talking about the Pro Bowl right here Monday. Not on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.